politicians among them believe that he should be tried for espionage and WikiLeaks rated as a terrorist organisation.
We are still hopeful that the matter will be resolved in this country. We still remain very optimistic about our opportunities on appeal. The judge made a very important finding in relation to both the fact of a secret trial, which in Sweden, which is an anathema to the open justice principle which we in this country, and I think in most civilized countries of the world, hold very dear.
Assange has the support of celebrities and human rights activists. He denies the sex charges against him, but he must continue to wear an electronic tag which his defence team called degrading and demeaning. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera, Belmarsh Court, London.
Now, something we won't be seeing for much longer.
2, 1. Booster ignition and the final liftoff of Discovery. A tribute.
Well, after 39 missions since 1984, Discovery is in space for the final time. 6 astronauts blasted off from the Kennedy Center in Florida to supply the International Space Station. Half past the hour, this is Al Jazeera, and these are the headlines. Libya's embattled leader, Muammar Gaddafi, is blaming Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda for fueling the uprising against him. In his second address to the nation since it began, he continued to sound defiant, but spoke via phone rather than in vision. There's heavy fighting in the town of Zawiya, 50 kilometers west of the capital, Tripoli, between opposition forces and Gaddafi loyalists. Further to the west, police and soldiers have reportedly deserted the Libyan leader in the town of Zuwara, where the opposition says it's now in control. The U.S. president has been consulting with European leaders about how to respond to the crisis in Libya. A statement released by the White House says Barack Obama expressed his deep concern with the Libyan government's use of violence, which violates international norms and every standard of human decency. That's the statement there. Meanwhile, with oil prices around a 2.5-year high, the U.S. president is trying to calm fears. They'll soar even higher. Obama says he's expecting to be able to ride out the crisis in Libya. Saudi Arabia says it can help counter supply disruptions. Iraq's government has imposed a curfew in Baghdad before planned demonstrations later on Friday. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has urged people not to take part, warning they could be attacked by al-Qaeda. Thousands of people are unhappy with the performance of their new government, and they're expected to rally. After 4 days of searching in New Zealand, hopes of finding more earthquake survivors are fading. The number of people killed in Christchurch is 113, with more than 200 still missing. Sniffer dogs are scouring the rubble, but the threat of aftershocks collapsing more buildings is hampering the rescue effort. Julian Assange has condemned the extradition system as unfair. The WikiLeaks founder says he'll appeal after a British judge ruled that he can be extradited to Sweden, where he's accused of rape and sexual assault. His lawyers argue he won't get a fair trial.
2, 1. Booster ignition and the final liftoff of Discovery.
After 39 missions since 1984, Discovery is in space for the final time. 6 astronauts are on their way to supply the International Space Station. NASA is retiring the aging shuttle fleet. The last ever flight by Atlantis is due in June. Inside Stories next.
The protests in Libya are continuing, and the Libyan leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, is struggling to hold on to power. Many parts of the country under the control of pro-reform protesters, many now fearing a violent showdown. But in a country divided by tribes, alliances and clans, it is difficult to draw the outlines of a future battle. Who exactly are the groups that are holding the future of the country in their hands? And how long can the Libyan leaders survive? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anand Naidu. Let's start by taking a look at Libya's military. The army makes up 2/3 of Libya's military. But it's largely a symbolic force, numbering around 50,000. They're not very well trained or equipped. In fact, Gaddafi has tried to keep the military divided in order to prevent a coup, which is how he himself came to power in 1969. It's highly unlikely that changes in the conventional military allegiance would affect him. Most observers feel they hold only limited power. Instead, ultimate power lies in the hands of a network of paramilitary entities, estimated at around 40,000, the so-called People's Militia. It reports to Gaddafi's revolutionary committees. Then there is the Revolutionary Guard, a roughly 3,000-strong elite corps responsible for the regime's and Gaddafi's security. Add internal security. The regime has used this force to repress dissent and the growth of the opposition. Then there are the tribes. It's believed that the three largest and influential tribes in Libya are the Ben Salim tribe in Cyrenaica, Beni Hilal in western Libya, and the Magarha tribe, which has the strongest ties to Gaddafi. And finally, there are the mercenaries. Gaddafi's regime has been making extensive use of hired African mercenaries, mostly from Chad and Niger, to carry out atrocities against the protesters. Of all the armed groups, these are the least likely to switch support. But if any of these entities ultimately change sides and join the protesters, it would seriously undermine Gaddafi's ability to survive. To discuss this, we are joined by three guests. From London, Faraj Najam. He's the author of Tribes, Islam and State in Libya. Also from London, Alia Brahimi. She's a research fellow at the London School of Economics. And joining us via broadband from Washington, D.C., Rashid Kikia. He is a member of the Libyan Conference of the National Opposition. Welcome to all of you to the program. Alia Brahimi, let me start with you. At this stage, it looks like large parts of the country are now in the hands of the opposition, especially those parts of the country in the east, and the protests are continuing in Tripoli. So, at this stage, which of all these myriad forces that exist in Libya would Colonel Gaddafi be turning to maintain power in the country and, of course, to protect himself and his family?
I think Gaddafi will be turning to the elite guard, elite revolutionary guard that he's always relied on. This is a highly ideological guard, but it's also a network of militias that actually have thrown their lot in with Gaddafi, politically and economically, and will in many senses be fighting for their own lives. So I think he's going to rely once more on these militias, and as you mentioned in the introductory segment, much less so on the army, which he's never historically held much faith in, and in actual fact seems to have deliberately weakened in order to prevent any form of rival base which might emerge to challenge him. So I think in the first place he'll be relying on his militias, and in the second place I think he'll count on the loyalty of parts of his tribe who for the same reason, who have also thrown their lot in with the regime and who are identified with Gaddafi's rule and who have a lot to lose if Gaddafi was to be ousted from power.
Now, when you talk about the militias and his tribe, are they one and the same?
Not necessarily, not as far as we know, but in actual fact some of the key security posts are thought to be staffed by members of his own tribe, but his sons actually, and I think we mustn't dwell too much on tribes.